Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Frosty Explain. This is the series What If As was mewtwo, and if you are new on this series, please have your consciousness just check out the channel once because I'm sure you will love it. The playlist session has many kind of different topics related to only Pokemons, and that will just fine for you. And there are also many different topics related to Marvel, DC, and some other animes. So I'm sure you will love that. If any of you have interest in watching fanfics, so just check them out. And today's episode we are going for the Ash Ketchum's first battle. So let's see how he will react to that. So without any more delay, let's begin today's episode.
Ash and the gang were now resting in a clearing inside the Viridian forest with Aveline working on lunch, Misty setting up the tent, and Ash facing his Pokemon. Okay everyone, it's time we get some training done. All of his Pokemon cheered at this declaration. Yeah. Misty turned to Ash before putting her hands on her hips. Ash, don't tell me you're going to try and train Metapod. Ash looked back at Misty before looking at his group of Pokemon and chuckled embarrassingly. Oh right, he went over and picked Metapod up before moving him to the side. Sorry Metapod, but you should sit this one out till you evolve. Metapod shimmied a bit in disappointment but knew he couldn't do much. Okay, Ash. Ash moved back to his team and pulled out his Pokédex. Okay, let's see what moves you two have. He pointed to Oddish and Partagiato and heard the move set they had respectively. Oddish. This Pokemon knows Absorb, Poison Powder, Growth, Sleep Powder. Pidgeotto. This Pokemon knows Quick Attack, Sand Attack, Wing Attack, Whirlwind. Ash nodded before putting it away. He would have just asked them what moves they knew, but Misty was here and with her being aware of him training his Pokemon he couldn't risk it. Okay, well you all have good moves, so right now, Oddish, we will work on your dodging while Pidgeotto will work on diving speed and wing attack. We might be able to evolve wing attack into Steel Wing. Ash pointed to a thick tree that was separate from the other trees and gave out an order. I want you to use wing attack on that tree and see if you can make your wings sharp enough to cut deep. If you start to feel tired, don't hesitate to take a break. Pidgeotto raised one wing and saluted to him. You got it. He then flew into the air ready to begin but paused when Ash shouted out. Pidgeotto, I want you to fly high before diving as fast as you can before pulling up and using the speed to enhance your wing attack. Pidgeotto nodded before flying higher into the air before diving down and pulling up an activated wing attack and slashing at the tree. Ash smiled before looking at Oddish. Okay, we are going to work on your dodging speed. Thinking for a second he looked to Pikachu. Mind helping out here? Pikachu nodded before bounding forward and stopping right next to Oddish. Ash smiled before bringing up how they would train. Okay, Pikachu, I want you to start by using Quick Attack on Oddish. She will do her best to dodge your attack. Once she does, give her a second before you do it again. As you continue to do this, Pikachu will start to go faster in her attacks. Pikachu, don't forget to give her a second after each dodge. Oddish, when you are ready for her to go faster, then tell her so you can keep going. Oddish and Pikachu nodded before they moved to the other side of the clearing to begin their training. Eevee began to jump around Ash's legs as she excitedly shouted, What about me? What about me? Ash smiled as he bent down and picked her up. You and I are going to work on an idea I had. We are going to combine your moves. Eevee tilted her head cutely as she tried to think about what he meant. Ash could see her confusion and smiled before bringing her to his chest and began to scratch behind her ears. What I mean is that we are going to have you learn how to use one move while using another. He moved over to another part of the clearing that had a large boulder before putting her down, much to her chagrin as she was enjoying the ear scratching. What I want to try is see if you can use Quick Attack before using Double Kick. So you are going to use Quick Attack to charge at the boulder, and when you're close enough you switch to Double Kick and hit the boulder. Eevee looked at the boulder and thought about what he asked her to do. Can I even do that? Ash could see the uncertainty on her face and he understood the thought. He wasn't even sure that it was possible since he hadn't seen it be done before, but if it was, it might help him on his journey. He grew anxious about asking Evie to do this as he rubbed his head in embarrassment as he didn't know if it was a good idea or not. It's just an idea I had. If we can't do that, then we can try and learn something else. Evie could feel his anxiousness and gained a determined look. I can do it. She moved away from Ash and faced the boulder. She steadied herself before she charged towards the boulder with a white streak behind her. Once she thought she was close enough, she leapt into the air before her feet began to glow white and she spun to try and hit the boulder. Unfortunately, she misjudged her momentum and ended up slamming into the rock with her back. Evie. Ash ran to the downed Pokemon and picked her up before looking her over. Are you okay? He mentally berated himself as he didn't want his Pokemon to get hurt because of a random idea he had. Evie shook her head before hopping out of his grasp. I'm okay. I can keep going. Are you sure? Evie turned her head to him and nodded with a smile. Ash watched as she tried again and gained a similar result, but she didn't stop. She got back up and tried again. Aveline saw that the training had started and immediately got into her Nurse Joy role and attire. She would be the one to tell Ash if he was pushing his Pokemon too hard, but she knew that if anything he might want to pull back their training to avoid them being hurt too much. She was interested in this odd way to use moves. Sure, she had heard of trainers switching from one move to another, but Ash was trying to combine the moves, not necessarily to make new moves but to enhance the ones they have. Having the speed of quick attack adding power to the double kick could very well be a deciding factor in battles. She turned her head to watch Pidgeotto dive before pulling up and using its speed to leave a large gash on the tree with wing attack. If I didn't know any better, I would have assumed he was trying to teach Pidgeotto aerial ace. Misty was a little impressed with the way Ash gave out his orders to his Pokemon. He's doing a lot better than I thought he would. And to have Pidgeotto try to learn Steel Wing. Smart, especially since the first gym uses rock types. Ash moved to sit next to Metapod and watched his Pokemon train. Don't worry, Metapod. When you become a Butterfree, I'll train you too. Metapod shimmied a bit as he spoke. It's okay, Ash. I just can't wait till I become one. Ash smiled at his Metapod. Soon, he turned back and grimaced at the sight of Oddish being hit by Pikachu's quick attack, got up, and ran over. Oddish, are you okay? Oddish bounced back up and shook her head to get some of the cobwebs out of her eyes. I'm okay, Ash. I just lost my footing on that last jump. Pikachu walked up with her paw behind her head as she sheepishly spoke. Sorry. I got a little too into it and didn't notice you weren't ready. Ash looked at them and said, maybe we should take a break now. Both Pokemon looked at him and said forcefully, no. Ash shrunk at being yelled at by them and would have defended himself if Pikachu didn't speak up. Ash, we're fine. It will take a lot more than that to make us call for a break. This is to help us get better, so we need to push ourselves to be better. We are going to get hurt while training, but it just means that we are improving and getting stronger. Oddish nodded in agreement to what Pikachu said. You don't have to worry about us. We will stop when we know we are out of energy. You can help us by encouraging us to keep going, not pulling us back when you think we are hurt. Be our trainer. Ash rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as he was being lectured by his Pokemon when it should be him doing that, right? Sorry girls. He saw them both nod to him and he got up and went to check on his other Pokemon. He went to Eevee and saw that she was still not making any progress in what he asked her to do. He stood on the side and watched her charge, leap, spin, and still impact the boulder on her side. He ignored his building concern and walked up to her. You okay? Eevee shook herself before nodding to Ash. Yep. I just can't seem to get the timing right. I have it where I can switch the moves, but I still hit the rock on my back or side. Ash looked at the rock before he gained an idea. He walked the path that Eevee was using before he dug his heel in the dirt and made a line. Try jumping when you reach this line and see if you can get it. The line was put earlier than her other attempts. He figured that if she had more time to do the spin, she would be able to use double kick on the boulder. Eevee looked at the line before she got to her starting point and tried again. When she came up to the line Ash made, she leapt into the air, activated double kick, spun around, and landed the move on the boulder. Once she pushed off of it, she looked at the spot she kicked and smiled brightly. I did it. I did it. I did it. She then jumped on Ash's chest, causing him to take a few steps back as he caught her before she nuzzled into him. Thanks, Ash. Ash laughed as he hugged Evie. You're welcome. Now use that marker to keep at it, and when you think you are ready, try a little closer. Got it. She leapt back onto the ground and began her training again. Ash looked to his final Pokemon and saw that he had stopped and was pecking at his wings. He walked over and saw that Pidgeotto was removing a couple of twigs and leaves that got stuck in them. Let me get those. Pidgeotto looked up as he finally noticed Ash and nodded. Thanks, Ash. Ash ran his fingers through the feathers as he kept pulling out several small twigs that were hidden. So how's it going? So far I think it's coming along. If anything, it's toughening up my wings. Not sure how long I would have to do this in order to learn Steel Wing, but this is also helping in my controlled dives. I can now pull up a few feet away from the ground without crashing. He looked to see that Ash had taken out a large splinter from his wing and felt so much relief once that was out, so that's what's been bugging me. Thanks for getting that, Ash. Ash flicked the splinter away as he smiled to Pidgeotto. Maybe you should take a small break to rest up. He looked to the tree to see that it already had a good number of gashes in it. Pidgeotto nodded as he flexed his wings. I think I'll do that before I get back to it. He then lowered himself onto the ground and fluffed up his feathers as he closed his eyes for a small rest. Ash got up and chuckled as he looked at how Pidgeotto was resting. Keep doing that and you might learn Roost before you learn Steel Wing. Pidgeotto chuckled at the thought. Wouldn't that be something? Ash then went to supervise the others' progress until it was lunchtime, which everyone was eager for. Misty sat and ate from the food Aveline had made for lunch. She looked over to Ash to see him eating his food fervently, and she couldn't help but wonder what his food was made from. It smelled tasty, but Aveline had told her it was specifically made for Ash. Maybe it has some medicine in it so he wouldn't complain about it. So how goes the training? I saw that you were having them try a few different things that could help them. Ash swallowed before he said anything. He learned that if he talked with his mouth full, he would be subject to Aveline's or his mother's harsh stare. I think we are making good progress. Though I don't know if I am pushing them too hard or not. Aveline finished cutting a slice of bread before she placed it on her plate and spoke to Ash. Ash, I believe that you are not going hard enough on them. You kept fidgeting when you saw them get hurt. I'm sure that they will let you know when they have had enough, so you don't need to be so concerned about it. All of Ash's Pokemon stopped eating their food and looked to Ash as they shouted out, yeah. Misty nodded in agreement to Aveline and the Pokemon. She didn't need to understand what they were saying to know what they said. They're right, Ash. I've seen trainers go harder on their Pokemon in order to get stronger. Sure, there are those that push them too far cause they don't care about them, but you are really doing decent training. Ash smiled and nodded in gratitude before he went back to eating his meal. After the meal, Ash and his Pokemon got back to training with them doing the same routine. He had seen some good progress with their training. Pidgeotto's wing attack started to gain a brighter glow to it, as well as the dive becoming sharper and faster paced. Oddish was now avoiding Pikachu's quick attack and was now almost dancing around them. Pikachu was now showing quicker response to continually using quick attack. Now she could almost instantaneously follow one with another, allowing her to make sharper turns, and this could very well be used for blindsiding her opponent that dodged her first one. Eevee had mastered the transition from quick attack to double kick at a fast pace. In fact, she had chosen to up the ante, and now when she lands the second kick on the rock, she uses the force of the kick to push off, land and hit the same spot with a quick transition into another quick attack. Aveline and Misty watched this go on and could not help but think that he was making greater progress than a new trainer would. Metapod watched all this with a little bit of jealousy, but he knew that he would not be able to do anything yet since he needed to wait until he evolved in order to train. He did notice that someone was coming up to the group. He grew worried when he saw him pull out a sword and was heading towards Ash, who had his back towards the newcomer. Ash. Look out. Ash heard the shout from his Pokemon and turned around, only to come face to face with the sharp end of a sword. He lost all his color as he paled at being threatened by the sword. Misty and Aveline went wide-eyed at the sight of Ash being threatened by a sword, with the latter shifting into her overprotective role and grabbing a Pokeball from her nurse outfit pocket. All the Pokemon stopped their training and looked to see Ash in danger. All the Pokemon panicked at the sight and they all got ready to fight off this person in order to protect Ash. The newcomer was a boy in samurai attire and looked to be just slightly older than Ash. "Are you the trainer from Pallet Town?" Ash gulped as he nervously answered, "Why yeah. I'm from Pallet Town." The newcomer smiled as he pulled his sword away before grabbing the sharp end and bending it, showing everyone that it was a fake. "A pleasure to meet you. I am Samurai and I have come looking for you in order to challenge you to a Pokemon battle." Ash sighed relief since he didn't have a sharp pointy thing in his face anymore. "Did you have to point that at me?" Samurai sheathed the sword as he smiled. "I feel it gets my point across." Everyone face faulted at that before Aveline moved to stand by Ash before checking his face for any sign of injury. Ash felt embarrassed that he was being examined when he wasn't hurt. "Aveline, I'm fine." Aveline turned his head to see the side of his face as she spoke. "I will be the judge of that. But from what I can see you are fine." Samurai raised an eyebrow as he saw a young Nurse Joy here. "I had not known that a Nurse Joy would go on a journey with another trainer." Aveline turned to give a hard look to Samurai. "I am a friend of his as well as his physician. I must go where he goes. And I would very much like it if you didn't point that at anyone." Samurai bowed by the waist. "I meant not to offend. Forgive me for my forwardness." Misty came up with her hands on her hips. "That's a little too forward for anyone if you ask me." Ash chuckled nervously before his mind registered what the guy wanted. "You want to battle me?" Samurai stood up straight as he smiled. "Yes. You see, I had battled 3 others from Pallet Town and each one was better than the last. I had heard that another would be coming through this forest. I told myself that I simply must battle him and I set off to find you." Ash felt a little downtrodden to hear that the others were further ahead of him, but he knew this was because he overslept the first day. He then looked at Samura as he ribbed the top of his head. I was actually in the middle of training and my Pokemon haven't been to a Pokemon Center in a while." Samurai nodded as he looked at the Pokemon that were out. "Yes, I had caught a glimpse of your training and I must say that I have not seen such methods before. I am unsure of what exactly you wish to achieve from it, but it is your Pokemon training methods, not mine." Ash was about to apologize and say that he wouldn't be able to battle, but his Pokemon spoke up before he could. Pidgeotto hopped forward as he raised his wing. "I still have the energy to go. Let me battle." Ash looked to see Pidgeotto ready to battle and it turned out he wasn't the only one. Oddish stepped forward and seemed all too eager. "I can battle too. I'm much faster on my feet and can run circles around any Pokemon he has." Ash looked to the rest of his Pokemon and asked, "What about you guys?" Pikachu plopped down before falling on her back. "Sorry, Ash. I'm a little pooped from using Quick Attack so much." Eevee moved over to sit next to Pikachu before laying on her stomach. "I could use a rest too." Metapod wanted to go to battle, but much to his ire, he couldn't. "Wish I could, Ash." Ash nodded at his 2 able Pokemon before looking at Samurai. "I think I can still battle you." Samurai smiled wide as he was eager to battle. "Very well. Let us see who comes out the victor." Misty stepped forward in worry. "Ash, are you sure your Pokemon are able to battle? They spent most of the day training." Ash nodded to Misty as he was also worried about his Pokemon, but they seemed eager and he wanted to see how far they got in said training. "I know, but they want to battle. And it will be the last thing we do for the day." Ash moved to one side with his Pidgeotto and Oddish at his side while Samurai was on the other side. Nurse Aveline stood as the referee as she looked at Samurai and Ash. "Are trainers ready?" Seeing them nod, she brought up the conditions. "This will be a 2-on-2 battle. Loser shall be the one that has run out of Pokemon or forfeits." She lifted her arm before bringing it down. "Begin." Samurai pulled out a Pokeball and tossed at Pinsir. "Here we go." Out of the Pokeball came a Pinsir that tested its pincers, ready for battle. Ash was surprised to see a Pinsir here and pulled out his Pokédex to gain its data. Pinsir has a pair of massive horns. Protruding from the surface of these horns are thorns. These thorns are driven deeply into the foe's body when the pincer closes, making it tough for the foe to escape. Wow, didn't think I would see one so soon. He thought about what he knew about the Pokemon before it clicked that it was a bug type. He looked to Pidgeotto, ready to give it a go. Pidgeotto flapped his wings and took to the sky and into position. I'm ready to go. Misty sat on the side as she put Eevee and Pikachu on her lap as they watched the battle. Smart. Using a flying type against a bug type, she shivered as she said that last part, but she was a good distance away. Far enough that it wouldn't bug her as much, but close enough to watch. Samurai swung his arm as he started the battle. Pinsir Vice Grip. Pinsir ran towards Pidgeotto with his pincers twitching. Ash gave his counter. Pidgeotto Fly higher and use Gust. Pidgeotto flew a few feet higher to be out of range for Pinsir before flapping his wings and sending his attack. Pinsir took the hit and was sent back onto his back. He winced in pain as it was super effective. Ash smiled as he knew that the move put him in the lead and wanted to finish it. Pidgeotto. Wing attack. Pidgeotto flew high into the air before doing a loop and diving straight down in the same way he had been doing his training. Samurai saw the bird Pokemon coming down fast and knew that it could finish this battle. He saw his Pokemon getting up and tried his best to stay in the battle. Pinsir. Use Harden. Pinsir lowered himself and took a knee as he gained a light sheen on his body and braced himself for the flying move. Pidgeotto brought his wings in and sped up. Then he started to leave a white sheen behind him, and just before he hit the ground, he opened his wings and pulled up with the sheen still following him. He charged towards Pinsir and then struck him hard enough to send the bug type flying. Samurai watched his Pokemon fly past him and impact a tree before slumping down with spirals in his eyes. Aveline gestured to Pinsir. Pinsir is unable to battle. Pidgeotto is the winner. Pidgeotto spun in the air before he flew over to Ash. No doubt I would win. Misty was stunned by the way the end of the battle. That wasn't wing attack. What was that? Aveline smiled at Ash as he hugged Pidgeotto. Looks like I was right. He ended up teaching Pidgeotto Aerial Ace before he learned Steel Wing. She then looked to see Samurai returning. Pinsir, are you ready for the second round? Much to her surprise, he shook his head as he walked forward. It pains me to say it, but I only have one other Pokemon with me and he would not be able to battle. He brought out his other Pokeball and released his Pokemon. Once the light died down, it showed another Metapod. Hello. Misty Sweet dropped at this. It wouldn't be that much of a battle, would it? Oddish grumbled as she kicked the ground. Aw man, I don't get to battle then. Ash smiled as he took a knee and pet her leaves. Sorry, Oddish. Next time. Oddish grumbled as she silently enjoyed the petting. Fine. Samurai returned his Metapod as he smiled towards Ash. I must say that you have given me a superb battle. I have no hesitation to say that you have given me the best battle compared to the others. Ash blushed at the praise as he bashfully rubbed his head and kicked the ground. Well, it was more Pidgeotto than me really. Pidgeotto smirked as he pecked his leg. Hey, it was your training that helped me out, so you deserve a lot of credit. Ash looked down at his Pokemon and smiled. Thanks. Samurai smiled as he saw that the boy had an understanding of his Pokemon. You must have a good bond if you are able to understand that he gives you just as much credit as he has. He then lifted his hand for a handshake. Thank you again for the battle. Ash returned the shake. You're welcome. It was fun. Samurai nodded before he let go of his hand. He brought out a bit of money before paying Ash for the victory. It took Ash a second before remembering that when battling someone outside of Pokemon League associations or other official battle leagues, the loser of the battle has to pay the winner a bit of money. The amount of money depends on the amount of Pokemon used and whatever the loser feels he should add. Since only one Pokemon was used, Ash was paid the minimum amount with a bit of extra which he assumed he was given due to the enjoyment Samurai had. He took the money and pocketed it so he could store it in his account later. Payments can be done through digital transfers through the Pokédex or through physical money that can be put into the account later. Samurai turned to the girls before bowing and giving his farewell. He turned to leave but stopped for a second. Oh, I would be careful around these forests. A swarm of beedrill is known to be around here. Misty squealed in fear as she lost all color and looked around frantically. I don't want to deal with bugs. Aveline smiled at Misty as she reassured the girl. Don't worry, Misty. She brought out a yellow can that had a Pokeball symbol on it. I brought some Pokemon repellents so we won't have to worry about them. Ash grimaced at the sight of the can. Every time someone used any of the types of Pokemon repellent, he couldn't stand the smell. It was like something was burning the inside of his nose and he made sure to stay away from it at all costs. Aveline. Aveline smiled at Ash as she knew exactly why he was making a face that told her that he was afraid she would use it. Don't worry, Ash. I'm only going to spray it in the area around us, far enough so that it won't bother our Pokemon or us. Samurai nodded at her way of using the Pokemon repellent, very wise. He then waved to the group. Anyway, farewell. Perhaps we shall meet again and have a rematch. Ash waved as he was excited by the prospect of a rematch. Bye. I'm looking forward to that rematch. The group watched as Samurai left and disappeared into the forest. Ash looked at his Pokemon and smiled. I guess we are done for the day. Most of the Pokemon nodded but Pidgeotto looked confused. Pidgeotto looked to the sky to see that it was still daytime and there should still be time for training or something else. Why? There is still time left in the day. The other Pokemon realized that they had to explain things to him but they knew they would have to do it later on. Aveline looked to Ash and smiled at him. Well, Ash, shall we? She was going to do her duty first before she applied the Pokemon repellent. It should allow them to be able to sleep better that way. Ash sighed as he knew that he had to go through the whole thing again. He moved towards the tent and began to take off his hat and shirt. Misty blushed again at this before she sighed. I'm going to have to get used to this. She moved to join the two at their camp as she thought about getting a good night's sleep since the Pokemon repellent should keep the bugs away. A couple of days later on the road. Insert Team Rocket motto. Yeah, still not doing it. Meowth came out of the hole that he had been digging himself as he glared at Jesse and James. Hey. Why don't you two stop messing around and help me out here? Jesse and James turned around and looked at how deep the hole was with Jesse smirking at it before saying, it's perfect. Once those twerps come by they will fall in and then we can capture that Pikachu. James pulled out a rose and posed, we will capture that Pikachu. Let's cover it up now. Jesse and James pulled Meowth from the hole and went to cover it up and made sure that it wasn't visible to anyone. Once they were done they posed again as they felt confident in their abilities to make a hole. James flipped his hair. I'm astonished at our talents. Jessie smirked as she stood back to back with him. It only goes to show our worth to Team Rocket. Meowth then walked up to them as he realized something. Hey. Where's da hole? Both Jesse and James looked at Meowth before looking at the road and realizing that not even they knew where they put the hole. They began to panic as they had lost track of it. James. Where is it? I don't know. It was here a minute ago. They kept pressing their foot on the ground, trying to find the hole. After a few attempts of the three trying to find the hole, they all pressed their foot on one spot which caused the ground beneath them to collapse. AAAAH. The three of them fell into the hole with Meowth on the bottom, James in the middle, and Jesse on top. Meowth growled at being the bottom of the pile as he grumbled, why the heck do I have to be at the bottom of yous heavy humans? Jesse immediately grew furious at being called fat. Hey. I dare you to say that to my face. As she was shouting she flailed her arms and legs around with her foot kicking the side of the hole. Crumble. The three paused as they looked up to see the top of the hole begin to collapse on them. And bury them in their own hole. Ash and the gang were walking down a different path from the one that Team Rocket were on as they had taken a slight detour when they took a break not that long ago. They made it out of the forest and could now see Pewter City. Ash in his excitement ran forward and stood on top of a large rock and looked upon the city. We made it. Misty smiled as she moved to stand next to him finally. We couldn't have gotten out of that forest soon enough. Aveline stood on the side of the large rock and looked up at the two. Oh, it wasn't so bad, Misty. At least Ash got some training done. Ash smiled cheekily at the praise. Pikachu and Eevee sighed tiredly as they had gotten a lot of training in the days they spent in the forest. Pikachu was leaning her back on Ash's head waiting to take a nap but knowing that right now wouldn't be a good time. Eevee was doing her best to stay on his shoulder but seeing the cheeky look on her trainer's face caused her to be a little playful and used one of her paws to tilt his hat down so they covered his eyes. Ash laughed at this as he looked at her. Ha ha, Eevee. Eevee smiled tiredly at him before sticking out her tongue. Pewter City is gray like a rock as it is known for its rocks. Everyone jumped at the sudden sound of someone below them. They saw it was a scraggly man with a red beanie and long brown beard. Ash fell on his ass as he sat up and looked at the man. Who are you? The name's Flint, and you two are sitting on my merchandise. Ash and Misty got off the large rock as they apologized about that, but it was when they saw that there were shelves with rocks labeled with price tags. Misty was dumbfounded by this. You sell rocks? Flint leaned back and looked at the group. Pewter City souvenirs. Want to buy some? Ash looked at the rocks and couldn't help but think, why would someone sell rock? Despite the fact that he thought this, the childish side of him wanted to get a souvenir. Maybe I can send them to Mom. Likewise, so that we have something to remember our time on this journey. He looked at the rocks again and found a couple of smooth ones that were a bit of a higher price but not out of his budget. Aveline looked to Ash and saw the look of want he had. Oh, Ash, despite how he had been raised as a human, there were times that his Pokemon nature showed itself. Like now he had clear signs of Pokemon curiosity. He is told about something and despite how simple or ridiculous it might have been, he would want to do it. Ash picked up a few of the smooth rocks and a couple of rugged ones and went to Flint. Can I get these? Eevee looked at the rock her trainer had in his arms and couldn't help but think, they look pretty. Pikachu was close to falling asleep on his shoulder but opened one of her eyes to look at what he was doing. She couldn't help but think that Ash was being a bit childish for buying rocks. Well, they do look pretty. Misty put her hands on her hips as she looked at Ash. Ash, you can't really be thinking of buying rocks, are you? Ash sheepishly looked at her as he mumbled, they're souvenirs. Aveline smiled as she shook her head. She looked to Misty. It's all right, Misty. It's just a simple thing, let him have his fun. Misty sighed but conceded. Flint looked at the boy and the price tags they had before calculating the amount. He then noticed that the two Pokemon on his shoulder looked tired. Well, once we finish our business, I'll lead you to the Pokemon Center. Your Pokemon look like they are about to fall asleep. Ash looked at his two Pokemon and saw that they looked tired. He smiled at Flint and nodded in gratitude. Thanks. Flint nodded as he brought up the amount. Oh, and I'll be adding a $2 charge for sitting on my rocks. Everyone fell over in shock at that random charge. Pewter City Pokemon Center. The gang walked into the Pokemon Center and went straight to the front desk with Ash grabbing a Pokeball tray that was stacked on the side and put in his Pokeballs in the slots with Eevee and Pikachu jumping off his shoulder and onto the counter next to the tray. Can you heal my Pokemon, please? The Pewter City nurse Joy smiled as she took the tray. Right away, Ash. Ash was a little surprised hearing that this nurse Joy knew his name when he was sure that he hadn't met this one before. How did you know my name? Nurse Joy smiled before speaking. I got a call from the Joy in Viridian and she told me to expect your arrival. As well as our cousin here. Good to see you again, Aveline. Aveline bowed in response. Good to see you again, Nurse Joy. Misty tilted her head as she gained a question from the interaction. How come she calls you by your name but you call her Nurse Joy? Ash was actually the one to respond. Aveline's mom told me once that when they are in their nurse outfit, they are to be called Nurse Joy. When they are in normal clothes they can go by their name if they want, but since most of the time they are on the job, everyone calls them Nurse Joy. Misty took in all that info and felt like a big unknown mystery was just solved. Well, that explains a lot. Ash nodded before he noticed something on the wall past Misty. Hey, what's that? He walked over to the wall and looked at a poster that had the symbol of the Pokemon League. Sign up to participate in the Pokemon League tournament. Sign up at any local Pokemon Center. More details are given once signed up. Misty and Aveline walked over to his side as he read it. Misty looked at Ash and smiled. It's for the upcoming Pokemon tournament. All trainers sign up to battle against each other for a chance to battle the Pokemon Elite Four or just to be the best out of all that battle in it. Ash gained a look of interest as he thought about himself being in the tournament. Wonder if I should sign up. Misty looked a little shocked when she heard this. Wait, weren't you training earlier to take part in it? Ash looked at her and shook his head. No. Misty's face faltered as he said it so nonchalantly. Ash looked back to the poster as he spoke again. I was training them because I wanted them to become stronger. I wasn't really thinking about a tournament, but maybe I should. Could be fun. Aveline shook her head good-naturedly as she spoke to Misty, knowing Ash, he just wanted to explore the world and meet all kinds of Pokemon. She then leaned in closer to the other girl and whispered, and with how we saw him react to his Pokemon getting hurt, he never thought about them battling too much. This could be good for him. Misty nodded as she could see how it could help in him being a better trainer. The group then moved to a seating area and waited for Ash's Pokemon to finish healing. As they sat, Ash looked to Misty with a questioning look. Hey Misty, are you going to enter the event? Misty choked on her own spit as she could not believe she was being asked that. She did her best to hold in her laughter as she could not help but find it funny how a gym leader was being asked that. Aveline covered her mouth as she giggled at this. Once Misty was able to speak properly, she shook her head as she took a deep breath. No, it's not my thing. Ash shrugged before he heard the chime signifying that his Pokemon were done. He got up and moved over to the main counter. He saw both Pikachu and Eevee sitting on the counter before they jumped onto his shoulders. Hey girls. Eevee sat on his right shoulder before she licked her paw and wiped her face. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Pikachu sat on Ash's left shoulder as she looked past his head at Eevee. It's a lot better than the last time I came to one. Ash clipped his Pokeballs onto his belt before looking at Nurse Joy. Can I sign up for the Pokemon tournament here? Nurse Joy nodded at this. Of course. All I would need is your Pokédex. Ash pulled out his Pokédex and handed it to her. Pikachu and Eevee were confused about this and looked at him with Eevee asking, Pokemon tournament. Ash then pointed at the poster on the wall and explained the details he was told from it. Once he was done, Nurse Joy finished registering him into the system. Nurse Joy also pulled out a pamphlet, a map, and a badge case before handing it to him. The pamphlet has details on the requirements and tournament location once you have what you need. The case is for you to put your badges in. Ash smiled as he took the items. Thank you. He chose to put the case in his bag so he wouldn't have to put it in his pocket. Pikachu crossed her paws as she thought about it. Sounds cool. I don't mind taking part in it. Eevee was unsure about it, but if Ash wanted to, she wouldn't mind it. Okay. I can join if you want. Ash rejoined Aveline and Misty before bringing up the pamphlet and reading it over. Says I need 8 badges to be part of the Pokemon Indigo League. Says there is a gym in this city too. We can start there. He looked over the pamphlet more and something caught his eye. Hey, it says there was a gym in Viridian. Why didn't I? Oh right. He remembered that at the time he was more preoccupied with getting Pikachu and Eevee help. Not to mention Misty wanting repayment for her bike and the whole Team Rocket thing. Misty nodded as she glared at him to remind him that he still owed her for the bike. She sighed when he brought his hands up in surrender before she spoke. I doubt you would be able to battle at that gym anyway. I heard that not only is it tough, but the gym leader is usually away from the gym and you would be lucky if you catch the guy while he was in. Something clicked in her mind and she yoinked the pamphlet out of his hand, ignoring his indignant cry, and began looking it over. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw it didn't say who the gym leaders were. Not even the type of Pokemon they used. Good, he won't find out. She did find it odd that they didn't at least tell you what Pokemon type the gyms used, but figured that it was meant to challenge them so they wouldn't try and use type advantage as a crutch. Aveline looked at Ash as she spoke in a firm tone. Ash, now that your Pokemon are back, you should call your mom, before you do anything else. Ash blushed at the fact that he almost forgot that he had to do that. Right, I'll be back. Delia was taking a break as she moved to her office. She pulled off her apron as she sat in a chair and looked at the photo she had on her desk. She was the owner of the only restaurant in Pallet Town, Pallet House. It was the lunch rush, so she and her employees were working to fill in the orders. Right now, most of the orders were done, so she felt like taking a breather. She loved this job even more now since it was keeping her mind off of Ash. Don't get her wrong, she loved him and would be doting on him every second, but right now that he wasn't here, she was worried beyond all belief. The job was distracting her from the worry. I wonder where he is now. I hope he is safe. Ring ring ring, ring ring ring, phone call, phone call. Delia looked to her office phone and sighed before getting up and going to answer it. Ring ring ring, ring ring, click. Hello. Pallet House, Delia Ketchum here. Hi, Mom. Delia gained a wide smile as she moved to sit in front of the phone and turned on the video. Ash. Ash smiled at seeing his mother's face pop up on the screen. Hi. Delia was happy to see her son was still fine, but she noticed his lack of a jacket. Ash, what happened to your jacket? Ash looked down at himself and chuckled sheepishly. I kinda lost it during my travels. He could have sworn she had seen that his jacket was torn apart back at the Viridian Pokemon Center, but she might have forgotten after he told her about what had happened to him on the road. She would care more about him than a piece of clothing. Delia gave a hard look to him as if seeing if he was lying, but from what she could see, he was telling the truth. She looked to Pikachu before asking, "Are you making sure of what I asked, Pikachu?" Pikachu nodded as she patted Ash's head. Of course. He changes his underwear every day. Ash blushed at this as he lowered his head to try and hide himself, despite knowing no one else other than him and other Pokemon could understand what Pikachu said. Eevee was confused about this, but the look subtle Pikachu gave her told her they were talking about Ash's secret. Delia felt a little better at knowing that Pikachu was keeping an eye on him, and from the small interaction she saw Pikachu have with Eevee, they both knew and were doing it together. The thought of Ash's secret being known by more caused her to worry, but since they were Pokemon, specifically his Pokemon, she felt it was okay. Ash got out of his embarrassment before he looked to his mother. Hey, Mom, I'm planning to join the Pokemon League tournament and wanted to let you know that I registered for it. Delia was a little stunned by this. Sure, Ash had enjoyed watching the battles, but he always said that he would go out into the world and befriend as many Pokemon he could, as well as have an adventure. The paranoid side of her told her that she should try and convince him not to do it, but the mother that wanted to make him happy in her pushed that notion away. Are you sure you want to join? Ash nodded. Yeah. Sounds like it could be fun, and my Pokemon seem like they think so too. Delia bit her tongue as she smiled at him. Alright honey, just make sure that you stay safe while you are out there and call me every chance you get so I know you are okay. Ash nodded before he remembered something else. Oh Mom, I'm going to send you souvenirs I get while I'm on my trip. They will be stuff I think are cool. Delia nodded as she smiled at him. Glad to see you plan on getting things to remember your journey. Ash nodded. Yeah. Well, I gotta go Mom, so I'll call you when I reach the next Pokemon Center. Okay, take care honey, love you. Love you too Mom. Bye. Ash hung up before glaring at Pikachu, who was smiling cheekily at him. Did you have to say that about what Mom asked you to do? Pikachu smiled as she giggled. Yep. Ash sighed before going back to the girls. Sounds like you plan to face the gym leader. Ash, Pikachu, and Eevee yelped in surprise when Flint magically came out of nowhere behind him. Ash gasped for breath before answering, yeah. I don't know how well I'll do against him, but I'm going to give it my all. Pikachu pumped her paw in the air. Yeah. Eevee smiled as she wagged her tail. We'll show him. Flint saw the enthusiasm they had and chuckled. If you plan on using those Pokemon, you won't stand a chance against Brock. Ash grew angry at this as he shouted out, hey. Flint chuckled again as he waved his hand to him. When you're finished here, I'll take you to the gym. Ash watched Flint head to the entrance and he looked to Eevee and Pikachu, who both gave him a shrug. He ran over to where the girls were and asked if they had anything else to do at the Pokemon Center. Seeing them shake their heads, he told them that they would be going to the gym, and so the group went off to join Flint. Pewter City Street. The group was following Flint towards the gym as Ash looked over the pamphlet to see if it had anything about the gym. Aveline patted his shoulder and she smiled when he looked at her. It doesn't give any details about the gym. You are going to have to use what you have in order to win the battle. Ash sighed as he gave Pikachu the pamphlet for her to put in his bag. Pikachu shoved the pamphlet in the front pocket and saw the feather they got on the road to Viridian. She pulled it out to show it to Eevee. Hey, look what we found when we were helping you to the Pokemon Center. Eevee looked at it with a shine to her eyes. It's so pretty. Flint turned his head to look at the boy who was planning to battle Brock. I couldn't help but overhear you telling your mom that you were taking up the Pokemon League challenge. She seemed a bit worried about you doing that. Ash nodded as he knew that his mom was very overprotective about him. Yeah, she was worried about me going on this journey, to begin with. Flint raised an eyebrow as he stated, and yet she let you go. Aveline was the one to pick up from here. She is still very worried about him, but she knew he wanted to go on a journey, so she let him go. Flint turned back forward as they arrived at the gym. Well, here it is. He turned to the group and smiled. Good luck with the battle. He looked at the girls before pointing to a door on the right. That door leads to the audience seats. Ash took a breath as he walked through the main doors to announce himself as a challenger, while Misty and Aveline moved to go through the door that led to the bleachers. Flint stood in front of the gym before looking up at the stone roof, a parent that let her son go off to do what he dreamed of doing, maybe. Pewter City Gym. Ash walked into the gym and looked around only to see that it was too dark to see. Hello, is anyone here? Are you here to challenge the gym leader? Ash was startled by the voice that came out of nowhere but shook off his shock before answering, yeah. Is he here? Suddenly a light turned on to show a teen sitting cross-legged on a rock platform. He had dark skin, eyes that looked to be perpetually closed, and spiky brown hair. He wore a green vest over a short-sleeve orange shirt and brown jeans. The teen got to his feet as he looked down at Ash. I am Brock, the Pewter City gym leader. If you are here to challenge me, then you must know that gym battles are different compared to normal battles. Ash nodded as he looked to Pikachu, who reached into his bag and pulled out the pamphlet before giving it to him. Thanks. He opened it up and read out something he learned about gym battles. Yeah, it says here that each gym leader can set up the rules for the battle and that there are 3 types of battles the challenger can take. A simple battle with no league association, a way for trainers to have a battle just because they want to have one. The league-associated battle, where the challenger can battle to win a badge in order to participate in the Pokemon League. And then there is the professional challenge battle, meant for trainers who want to battle the gym leader with their best Pokemon. The last one is recommended to those who have trained hard and be at least at the level of having 6 or more badges. Brock nodded. It's good to see a trainer take the time to know what is offered. Brock jumped off his platform to stand on ground level. Most trainers tend to come in and demand my best team, not knowing that they are way out of their league. So which one will you take? Ash lowered the pamphlet before thinking about it for a second. Well, I've only had my Pokemon for about 2 weeks, so I know I wouldn't be able to handle your A-team if it says I should be at the level of someone who had 6 badges. So I will go with just the Pokemon League associated battle. Brock nodded. Smart. He looked to the 2 Pokemon that were on Ash's shoulder. If you had those 2 for 2 weeks, they would not have stood a chance. They still might find it too challenging to win. Pikachu felt insulted at being called weak as she let out a few sparks. Hey, show me what you got and I'll fry them. Eevee felt a little down at what he said and lowered her ears in sadness. She was brought out of her sadness when he felt Ash put his hand on her head and pet her gently. Hey, we only just started training. Someday we will be able to battle his A-team. So don't worry about it for now. Thanks, Ash. Brock saw the interaction with the challenger and his Pokemon and smiled. Well, now that you have chosen, let us begin. He brought up his hand and snapped his finger. The room began to shake and a large metal door opened up on both sides of the room in order to let the arena move in. Ash panicked at seeing this and began to run back to where the door was so he would avoid the battle arena. Seeing that he wouldn't make it, he jumped on top of it since it was only a foot in height. He fell on his ass as both sides of the arena connected and shook violently. Brock only had to take a few steps to avoid it but found it amusing to see the challenger's actions. Well, may I have your name before we begin? Ash got to his spot as he nodded. I'm Ash Ketchum, from Pallet Town. Quote. Brock nodded as he pulled out a Pokeball. Brock Harrison, Pewter City Gym Leader, and I accept your challenge, Ash. He then threw his Pokeball into the arena summoning his first Pokemon. Go, Geodude. A Geodude came out of the Pokeball with his arms crossed before spreading them to his side, ready to roll. Pikachu sparked her cheeks as she jumped off Ash's shoulder. Let's go. She was stopped mid-air by Ash grabbing her tail. She dangled upside down as she glared at Ash. Let me go, Ash. I'm going to show him I can take on any Pokemon he's got. Ash was afraid that Pikachu might shock him, so he tried to calm her down. Sorry, Pikachu, but Geodude is a rock type. None of your electric attacks will work on him, and tackle and quick attack won't do much. Pikachu puffed out her cheeks as she did see that what he said was true. She crossed her paws as she grumbled, grumble grumble, fine. She then looked back up to him as she asked, can you let me down now? Ash lowered her to the ground as he smiled sheepishly. Sorry. He let Pikachu run back up onto his shoulder as he thought about who to send. Brock nodded in approval at what he did. He knows that Pikachu is a poor matchup for a rock type like my Geodude. Not bad for a beginner. Upon the seats, Aveline sighed in relief as she was afraid Ash would have let Pikachu go into battle where she was at a clear disadvantage. That was smart of Ash. I thought for sure he would have let Pikachu battle. Aveline nodded to Misty's statement. He probably would have if he wasn't tutored about Pokemon when he was younger. As they watched Ash get ready, a bunch of younger kids popped up and leaned on the railing to watch the battle. Misty was surprised by this but noticed something. They all look like younger versions of Brock. Must be his siblings. He sure has a big family. Ash ran his hand over his Pokeballs and thought about the types he had. Most of his Pokemon didn't have any moves that would work, but he did have one that was ideal for this. He grabbed the Pokeball, turned his hat backward, and threw his ball. I choose you. Oddish. Oddish popped out of the ball and saw that she had been called into battle. I'm ready. Brock nodded. Smart kid. Knows his Pokemon. Challenger has the first move. Oddish vs Geodude, choose your battle music. Ash brought his fist up as he gave his command, Oddish absorb. Oddish gained a small green aura as particles of light began to leave Geodude, who began to wince at its energy being drained. Brock was again impressed that this beginner was battling smart but knew he couldn't let this keep going. Geodude. Tackle attack. Stop it from absorbing your energy. Geodude shook his head before charging at the grass type. Oddish. Dodge. Oddish stopped using her grass move and immediately jumped onto one of the boulders, avoiding the tackle attack. Ash sighed in relief as her training was becoming useful, but he knew he was still in a battle. Oddish keep dodging and using absorb. Whittle his energy down. Oddish nodded. Got it. She began to use absorb again, ready to dodge any attack sent her way. Brock winced as this could mean the end of Geodude. Geodude, stop it from taking your energy. Geodude nodded as he used tackle again to stop her, only to be dodged over and over. Oddish continued to use absorb for a bit before dodging the tackle attack. She could see that Geodude was becoming weaker and slower as this kept going. As she felt some relief that she was going to win, it seemed that Geodude pushed the last of his energy to charge fast at her. In a panic, she jumped to avoid it, but with her lack of focus, she lost her footing and tumbled as she landed. Geodude did not see where he was going and slammed into the boulder that Oddish was just on, embedding into it. He tried to get out, but it turned out that thanks to losing a lot of energy, he was stuck. Oddish did not see this, so she immediately just activated absorb where she thought Geodude would be. However, something unexpected happened when she did. The green aura increased in size and gained a white hue, and she felt herself absorb far more energy than before. All the spectators were surprised by this as they tried to figure out what happened. Two of them knew immediately what Oddish just did. Aveline smiled at how Oddish gained a new move. She has learned Mega Drain. Misty looked to Aveline as she asked, Mega Drain. Aveline nodded. Much like Absorb, Mega Drain takes energy from the opponent, restoring the user's own health. It would seem that by using Absorb enough, it has evolved into Mega Drain. The kids heard this and all pouted at how Oddish was able to beat Geodude, with one of them speaking to the others. Don't worry. Brock's next Pokemon will win. Misty and Aveline heard this and both grew worried at what the next Pokemon might be. Brock had also come to the same conclusion, and he saw Geodude have swirls in his eyes when Mega Drain. He brought up his Pokeball. Geodude returned. His Pokeball absorbed his Pokemon. He smiled as although it was his loss, he lost due to smart thinking by the challenger. Winner, Ash Ketchum. Ash jumped in the air as he shouted out, "We did it." Oddish leapt into the air in joy as she had won the battle. I won. Eevee and Pikachu cheered for their friend's victory. Way to go. That was amazing. Well done in learning Mega Drain, Oddish. Oddish blushed at her friend's praise. She looked to Ash to see him smiling brightly at her, and her smile grew almost as wide. She looked back towards Brock and waited for the next opponent. Brock nodded to Ash, you have trained your Pokemon well. But you won't win this one so easily. He pulled out another Pokeball. He pulled it back before tossing it into the arena. Go. Onix. Out of the Pokeball came an Onix as it roared out its arrival. Ready for battle. Oddish felt nervous at the sheer size of her new opponent. Oh boy. Pikachu and Eevee saw the major difference between the two Pokemon, with both beginning to shake Ash's head, with Pikachu speaking rapidly, Ash, call her back. She shouldn't have to face a Pokemon that big. Eevee was in the same boat but speaking less frantically, please, Ash. I don't think Oddish can take him on. The reason they didn't think Oddish could win was that, although they had trained during the journey to Pewter, Oddish had worked more on her agility and evasiveness. She didn't have any strong grass moves yet, and she only just learned Mega Drain. Ash stopped his head from shaking and looked at Oddish and could see how nervous she had become and called out, Oddish, do you want to call it quits? Oddish looked back to Ash and could see the concern her trainer and fellow Pokemon had. She felt relief that she could pull back if she wanted, but she also wanted to see how far she could go. She shook her head and turned back to face the much larger Pokemon before gulping as she looked up. Brock nodded in admiration. You give your Pokemon the choice on whether to continue or not, and your Oddish chooses to keep going. There is a strong understanding between you and your Pokemon. Now let's begin. Onix vs Oddish, chose your battle music. Brock thrusted his arm forward as he gave a command, Onix, tackle. Onix threw his head forward in an attempt to smash into Oddish. Ash knew that this would be tougher since Onix's size gave its attack a heavier impact. Oddish dodge and use Mega Drain. Oddish leapt to the side as Onix crashed at the spot she was just standing. She turned and was about to use her move, but she had to jump again as the tail swung around and almost hit her. Brock knew that Mega Drain would cause major damage to Onix despite how strong Oddish was at the moment, so he needed to keep the flow of the battle in his favor. Don't let Oddish get a chance to attack. Onix continued his assault by swinging his tail, causing the boulders Oddish stood on or landed near to shatter. Oddish couldn't get any time to use her move as she kept dodging the attacks. She had to avoid the tail over and over again, but she was losing balance. Ash didn't know what to do as he couldn't see any way for her to get the footing needed to counter. He began to panic as he saw Oddish lose her footing completely and trip. Oddish, look out. Oddish tried to think of a way to get some space between her and Onix, but every time she moved further away, Onix would follow. It was after Onix destroyed another boulder that the rocks pelted her face, and when she landed, she slipped on several of the small pebbles that now littered the arena. Falling on her face, she tried to get back up but soon found herself being wrapped up by Onix's tail. Oh no. She was lifted into the air and felt herself being squeezed. Brock watched as Onyx lifted Oddish by its tail and knew that this match was his. Give up. Your Oddish won't be able to escape now that Onyx has it. Ash, Pikachu, and Eevee were all panicking at the sight of Oddish being crushed. Pikachu grabbed Ash's hair and began to shake his head. Do something, Ash. Eevee curled up on his shoulder and covered her eyes with her paws but kept peeking to see what would happen. Ash's mind was going into overdrive to think of a way out of this, and then he realized that there was only one way out. Oddish. Use Mega Drain. Despite being crushed by Onyx's tail, she had heard the command and focused on the move. She gained a green and white glow as she began to absorb Onyx's energy. Brock watched as Onyx winced at having its energy taken from him. Onyx. Tighten your grip. He knew that this was now a battle of durability. Who would win, Onyx or Oddish? Ash knew this as well as he shouted, Oddish. Keep it up. He felt nervous at this as Oddish kept taking energy that she lost from the squeezing. The tension was thick as the two Pokemon continued their struggle, and everyone knew that only one would make it out. Soon the victor was clear. Oddish's attack ended as she gained swirls in her eyes and fainted. Onyx lowered his tail and led Oddish onto the ground. Oddish. Ash ran onto the arena to get to Oddish and picked her up when he got to her. Oddish opened her eyes as she looked up at Ash. Did I do good? Ash smiled as he nodded. Yeah, you did. Now get some rest. You earned it. He pulled out her Pokeball and returned her. Brock could see the care Ash had for his Pokemon as he crossed his arms. Your Oddish fought bravely. You should be proud of how far it got. Ash smiled at the Pokeball in his hand and answered, not looking up. I am. He then moved back to his spot and looked to Brock. I'm ready. He looked up to see that Onyx was sweating and breathing heavily. He thought about the Pokemon he had, and there was only one Pokemon that might be able to win this. He looked to Eevee. Think you can end this? Eevee was surprised that she was being called out and nervously looked to Onyx. She was still intimidated by his size, but she saw that he was tired, and with her move, she could win. Okay. Pikachu indignantly jabbed a finger into Ash's cheek. How come she gets to battle? Ash looked to Pikachu as Eevee hopped off his shoulder and went into the arena. Eevee has a better chance than you do, Pikachu. I'm sorry. Pikachu pouted as she sat on his shoulder and looked away as she puffed her cheeks. I get to battle next time. Ash nodded as he knew she might zap him if he didn't. Brock just could not stop being impressed with Ash and his interactions with his Pokemon. You have had your Pokemon for only a short time, yet you have a deep understanding with them. This will be the final battle between us. Ash nodded as he wanted to start this off with something no one ever did before. Eevee. Double Quick. Brock was confused by the name of the attack and watched as Eevee began to use Quick Attack. He might have been more nervous than I thought to mispronounce an attack like that. Onyx counter with Tackle. Onyx charged at Eevee to meet the attack head-on. Brock waited to see who would win this attack struggle. He assumed that his Onyx would win since size does play a factor in these kinds of battles. He was stunned to see Eevee jump into the air and spin in the air before its legs glowed white. Eevee saw Onyx move closer to meet in the middle. She was afraid she might mistime her attack, but believed she could do it since she had practiced this through her training. Trusting her instincts, she leapt into the air and spun while activating Double Kick. The added momentum of Onyx's tackle along with Eevee's quick attack added more power to the double kick, and when Onyx was hit by two super effective strikes, he was sent flying back. Eevee's attack wasn't done, as once she landed she used another quick attack to send Onyx further away. Brock was shocked to see what had just happened, and his mind immediately figured out what had happened. Using quick attack to strengthen double kick followed by another quick attack, he smiled as he hadn't seen a trainer do that before. Sure, there are some moments where it was similarly implemented, but not to this degree. Onyx impacted the ground hard as he felt the last of his health leaving him. He stubbornly kept conscious and slowly got up. Ash knew that it wouldn't take much to end this battle, so he called out to Eevee. Eevee, let's end this. Go. Before he could finish his command, he felt a bunch of hands and arms grab him all over. Stop. Don't hurt Onyx anymore, you bully. Stop being mean to Onyx. Aveline and Misty blinked as they looked to where the kids were just at to see it empty. They both had a similar thought. How did they get down there so fast? Ash looked at all the kids that were hanging on him and felt bad at being called all these things. I'm not a bully. Pikachu clung to Ash's head as she tried to remain on his shoulder. She looked at all the kids, and despite how she wanted to shock them off her trainer, she didn't have the heart to shock kids much younger than her trainer. Brock shouted out at his siblings, "All of you stop. This is an official match and he has the right to finish this battle." The kids hanging off Ash all looked to Brock and gave sad looks. But Brock, he was being mean to Onyx. We know how much you love your Pokemon and Onyx shouldn't be hurt so much. Brock sighed as he sternly spoke, "This is still a match and you should not interfere with this." But big brother, Ash now felt terrible for making these siblings argue with each other and made his choice. Eevee, return. Everyone was surprised to hear this from the boy. He had been only one move away from winning, but now it looked like he was throwing in the towel. Eevee hesitated, but when she looked at Ash, the small nod told her that he was sure about this. She walked slowly back to Ash. The kids got off Ash as Eevee grew closer, which allowed the fox Pokemon to leap back to his shoulder. Ash smiled and pet Eevee. "You did great, Eevee." Eevee blushed at the praise as she shrunk in on herself. "Thank you, Ash." Ash turned to leave but stopped when he heard Brock call out, "Ash, wait. We could still finish the match." Ash looked back to Brock with a serene smile. "It's fine, Brock. I don't want you or your siblings to fight over Onyx being hurt. Maybe we can have a rematch someday." Ash then waved to him before turning to leave. Aveline and Misty rushed out of the building to follow Ash. Brock returned Onyx to his Pokeball as he looked at the door. After a moment of thought, he ran towards it. Once he made it outside, he saw that Ash was already gone. He deserves the badge. As far as I'm concerned, he won that match. Maybe you should offer more than just the badge. Brock turned to the side to see Flint walk up to him. He was stunned when he saw the man take off the beard and hat. And maybe he can offer you a way of achieving your dream. Dad. Later that day, Ash, Aveline, Misty, Pikachu, and Eevee were on the road heading to the next city. They had already gone to the Pokemon Center to heal up Oddish and Eevee. They even went to the shop to see if they could get Ash another jacket, but none of them were ones that he liked. Misty looked to Ash as she was impressed with his battle. "That was a really good battle you had. And Eevee's move combo was really helpful." Aveline pitched in her as well. "Don't forget that Oddish helped out as well. If not for her, it might have been a tougher battle." Pikachu was not in a good mood as she had puffed her cheeks so much that the red circles on her cheeks seemed to be getting bigger. "I still say you guys won." Eevee looked to Pikachu and smiled sadly. "Pikachu, the battle was ended before we could see who would win." That set Pikachu off as she raised her paws in the air. "No. You won. You were one move away from winning." She crawled over Ash's head to land on his other shoulder with Eevee and hugged her head. "You won that battle." Misty was confused about the action, but since Ash was watching his two Pokemon on his shoulder, he saw the look of confusion one of his female companions had. Pikachu is a bit mad that Eevee wasn't declared the winner. Misty nodded as she understood that Eevee was robbed of victory. "Hey, Ash." The group turned to see Brock running towards them, with a large pack on his back. Brock was getting closer to the group he saw Ash was with and was ready to hand over the badge, but his eyes landed on one of his companions. In an instant, his demeanor changed from serious to goofy as hearts replaced his eyes and he fell to his knees, sliding to a stop in front of the girl. He was now surrounded by a pink surrounding with slight hints of yellow and sparkles as he spoke. "Oh beauty that has struck my heart. You have captured my heart with your womanly charm and would like to be your boyfriend." Everyone sweet dropped at the sudden change of demeanor and stood there stunned as they did not expect anything like this to happen. After a minute, Aveline smiled sweetly as she spoke. "Sorry, but no thanks." Brock turned to stone as he cracked at the sudden rejection. He slumped to the ground with a dark aura of depression. Ash chuckled nervously before asking, "Hey Brock, what are you doing here?" Brock got out of his depression and stood up before reaching into his pocket. I actually came here for two things. First was to give you this. He pulled out the boulder badge and brought it up in his palm to give to Ash. Despite how the match ended, you won and more than deserved this. Ash looked at the badge as he was surprised to be given this. He slowly lifted his hand to take the badge. Once it was in his hand, he smiled at Eevee and showed it to her. Looks like you were the winner after all. Eevee wagged her tail in happiness. Pikachu nodded as she was now satisfied at Eevee getting the victory. Brock then cleared his throat as he brought up his other reason. I had another reason I'm here. I wanted to ask if I could join you on your journey. This surprised all of them as Ash asked, you wanna come with us? But what about your gym? And your siblings? Brock smiled at the question. Brock's house. Flint was sewing up a dress in a frantic panic as a couple of his kids were hanging off him and a couple of them were running around causing him to call out to them to calm down. Brock looked to Ash as he spoke, it's in good hands. Ash didn't know who he was referring to, but if he was sure about it then he had no reason to deny the company. Well, if you want to join us then welcome to the group. Brock smiled and nodded, thanks for having me. That night, Brock watched as Aveline examined Ash with a bit of confusion. He turned to Misty and asked, what's she doing? Misty was putting her sleeping bag into the second tent before she moved out of the tent. She was a bit hesitant to answer since it wasn't her story to tell, but she also felt that it would save the duo the trouble of having to bring up something they might find uncomfortable. An incident when Ash was born caused him to be stillborn. They were able to save him, but his mom became very protective of him. For him to be on this journey, Aveline joined so she could be his physician. She looked to Nurse Joy and Ash before she finished. That's why we started setting up camp early, cause this is a daily thing and it takes up time. Brock nodded in understanding as he looked to Aveline and Ash. He is an interesting kid. Can't wait to see what he does in the next gym. Right, Misty? He gave a knowing smirk to Misty, who just slumped at what he meant. Ugh, why does he have to go to Cerulean? Brock patted her on the shoulder as he nodded. He knew about Misty being a fellow gym leader. They have never officially talked to each other, but they had run into each other during the Pokemon League Indigo gym leader meetings that happen on occasion. They were the youngest of the members, but they were skilled trainers when they had their official gym Pokemon. Brock then saw that Aveline was done with the examination and Ash putting on a very oversized set of pajamas. He tilted his head in confusion as he gestured, and got the clothes. Misty shrugged at this. He said that they are the most comfortable type to sleep in. Brock shrugged before he entered the tent to get into his sleepwear. Later, Ash was sleeping peacefully as he, Pikachu, and Eevee huddled together, with both smaller Pokemon in his arms. His tail flicked every now and then as he slept. Aveline was still awake as she wrote down a record of her examination of his Pokemon body. She muttered to herself as she wrote things down. Muscle tone, still stable, tail still needs stimulation, coat lost a small bit of sheen, diet adjustment. She then felt his tail hit her leg. Normally this wouldn't bother her, but the force behind the flick caught her attention. She looked up from her journal as she saw Ash's face scrunch up. Ash's breathing soon began to become frantic as his tail twitched more and more. Mew. 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 This wasn't the first time Aveline had heard Ash talk in his sleep. And it was thanks to this that she knew that Ash couldn't speak English when he was in his normal form. Like all Pokemon, he called out his species name when talking. Though he was called Mewtwo, it seemed that when he speaks as a Pokemon he says the name of the original Pokemon, Mew. Aveline moved closer to Ash to see if there was something wrong. Pikachu and Eevee opened their eyes as the larger Pokemon started to toss and turn. Pikachu got out of his arms and moved closer to his face. Ash. Ash began to pant heavily as he muttered frantically. Aveline couldn't understand what he was saying, but Pikachu and Eevee could. Stop it please, stop, it hurts. Eevee moved closer to his face and licked gently on his forehead. She whispered to him in an attempt to calm him down and nuzzled his head with her own. Ash, you're okay. Nothing is hurting you. Aveline couldn't take seeing him like this and knew that if he kept this up, the others would wake up and they may come to see what was wrong. She moved closer to try and wake him up, but suddenly Ash flailed harshly, and she had to dodge his tail as it swung past her head. She harshly whispered in concern, "Ash. MEW." Ash screamed out as his eyes shot open, glowing blue. MEWWWWW. Ash. Unknown location. A group of scientists were lit up by flickering blue light as they flipped a switch and watched something. Please. Stop. Make it stop. The scientists smiled in sadistic glee as they turned off the electrical shocks. They looked at the quivering form of their experiment. Seems like it's still alive after all we did to it. True, maybe we should up the voltage, spoke a female scientist. Idiot, we are trying to make sure it's stable, not kill it, said another of the scientists to the last one to speak. The female rolled her eyes despite it not being visible behind the goggles. Oh please. Giovanni has his weapon. Sure, he said he wouldn't mind if we gave him this one, but he was unimpressed at the size. He said that we can keep doing what we were doing with it until it is ready. Remember that we slowed down its growth to keep it stable longer. Too bad Fuji succeeded in his second attempt, even if the thing killed him. She then moved to the switch and turned a dial that was next to it. She smirked as she turned it up 2 notches and flipped the switch. The other scientists moved to join the female scientist and watched with her. Eyes opened up to show ruby eyes looking at the scientists as before shutting closed in pain. Make it stop. A tail moved past the face, a tail with a pinkish hue. Somewhere in Kanto. Make it stop. Mewtwo slammed a Nidoking and Nidoqueen into the ground before a few Team Rocket grunts threw some Pokeballs to capture them. He turned his head to look up in the distance as he had barely heard a whisper. Mewtwo. We are moving on. We have taken all the Pokemon of worth from this location. Mewtwo looked towards Giovanni, who was now wearing a burnt orange suit, before nodding. He floated in the air before looking back in the direction he heard the voice. It sounded young and female, but he was unsure of if he had heard it or not. What was that? Behind his visor, his purple eyes narrowed. Back with Ash. Aveline was trying to hold Ash down as he thrashed around. She was glad that the tent was large enough that he wasn't hitting the sides of the tent and causing it to collapse. She was glad that he didn't have any psychic abilities, otherwise, he might send things flying. She looked to his face to see his eyes still glowing as his head kept turning left and right. Pikachu tried to hold down his tail, but since Pikachu couldn't put much weight on it, she ended up hanging onto it as it flailed in the air. Eevee was holding onto Ash's head as she cried out, "Ash! Calm down. Make it stop please," came the whispered gasp of his cry. Aveline had to stop him and knew only one way that would work. She let go of one of his arms and she had to lean back to avoid his hand. She was about to do what she needed when she heard something that caused her to panic. "Ash. Aveline. Are you two okay?" It was Brock and most likely Misty, and through Ash's thrashing, she heard the other tent's zipper opening. Oh no.
Hey guys, if you like this video, please do one thing, like it, share it with your those friends who love to watch Pokemon or any fanfic of anime which are related to specific genres. So please do that and turn on the bell icon for notification of these any other series which are still ongoing on channel. Thanks for watching.